about banks. We capitalized the banks. The government capitalized the banks a couple of years back. There is talk of again recapitalizing the banks to another level. How do you make sure that this time when the recapitalization happens, the money goes into creating more money rather than not creating NPAs?
So I would say here very frankly that every era has its own type of banking. So as I mentioned, that was a balance sheet era. Now it is the good corporates will get money. You will have to, the trust between the bankers and the bank and the companies will have to be built. And I think we will see a lot of conservative banking that will happen in the next 2 years, because capital is expensive and there is a lot of accountability, and conservative approach to banking will be seen. People who perform well with a good rating are going to get money, and those who have sharp practices will slowly fall by the roadside. So I see a very, very distinct change of the style of banking, not the original old style of banking, but a new style of banking. Plus, what will happen, apart from the capital, NCLT recoveries will start flowing in the next couple of years. And there will be a lot of cleanup that will happen across the corporates also. So once this corporates are cleaned up in a major way, cleaning up happens, new fresh funding comes in terms of equity for all these stressed assets, there will be a new look and a new management which may be able to provide or give the confidence to the bankers to give money. It's going to be a slow process. People expect people will start lending very quickly. No, it is going to be a very slow process of confidence building.
Okay, Mr. Ravi, there's nobody better than you to talk about banking and financial services. You talked about the technological aspect of banking, fintech. Again, fintech has become like NBFCs. Everyone who's in the financial services space says we are a fintech. Tell us, which are the kind of fintechs that will survive going forward?
So again, unlike NBFCs, fintechs have mushroomed, and they are playing the valuation game, and which is not going to take them too far. What really needs in fintech is how are they going to get associated with a bigger bank, and what are the type of services that they are going to augment. So fintech on its own is not going to survive, except if they really grow in size and go over a certain level of profitability. So my take is fintech is going to be a challenge. So the uniqueness of a fintech company is going to be the only thing that will drive them forward. For example, aggregators, maybe any other. You take even in the insurance, take policybazaar.com. How have they come up? So similarly, you'll have to find some very, very bright ideas how they will work with the banking system. They cannot be competitors to the banking system. They will have to work within the banking system and see that how they can supplement the bankers and other NBFCs. That is how first step for fintech is going to be the first step. Then they will have to increase in size, consolidate, and look for their journey. Then there is a scope for new banking, which is a new concept that has been brought in. And new banking is nothing but a fintech company which is in the digital form of banking and which will align to a brick and mortar bank. So I think fintech has a great opportunity there, and I think they must look at that.
Okay. Now, one of the big, I would say two big focuses of any board member, auditor, one is compliance. Over the last few years, compliance has gone up. Second is, as the compliance has gone up, there will also been a focus on forensics, forensics. How? Because there are frauds happening, there is diversion of funds. So tell us how are these two linked, and tell us what are we doing to prevent fraud, and how are we using technology?
So fraud is a phenomena that is happening, and it has there are various committees which actually came on various suggestions on frauds, and there is a lot of reporting on frauds also, and every board, every bank, there is a reporting of number of frauds, external frauds, employee related frauds, and cyber frauds. So now what you are seeing is going to be the increase of cyber frauds, and cyber security is going to be the key to eradicate fraud or reduce the number of frauds. And also preventive fraud mechanism is going to be the order of the day. Now coming to compliance, if you see the cost of compliance, if you take a mutual fund or an insurance company, or you take a bank, the cost of compliance is nearly 8 to 10% or 12% of its total top line. So it is not small. The cost of compliance and the number of compliances and multiply regulated. See, a bank or an NBFC or anybody is multiply regulated. Today we have somebody who is listed is got SEBI, RBI, IRDA, then PFRDA. So you have an MCA. So you're multiply regulated.
You're making the case for a single regulator. That's another discussion by itself. But
yes,
that's the point you're driving at.
Yes. So the cost of compliance actually enhances, and it really, the cost becomes very, very difficult, because compliance people take a lot of responsibility, and there is every institution has a compliance head who takes a lot of responsibility. So, and I think the axe falls on them very fast. So I think this is, and so many regulations to comply. You see, each regulator has 900 to 1000 regulations to comply, and between that they have to work, and there could be a regulatory arbitrage. Means one regulator may not prescribe something, the other regulator will prescribe. So I think that is the compliance is a very, very key thing, and the board actually needs to get into the depth of it. When I was in the banking board, we used to ask what level the compliance, the pyramid of compliance, who all is responsible for compliance and what they are doing as a compliance. So I think the board needs to be very careful and proactive as far as compliance is concerned. And fraud, of course, I have made my statement. Cyber frauds are going to be the next thing. And you see a lot of messages, you're seeing WhatsApp messages, you see a lot of preventive this thing by TRAI, etc., IRDA, everybody is giving a lot of advisories on fraud. So I think we need to be very careful, and I think the next level is going to be to eradicate cyber fraud, and we require cyber security at an enhanced level.
Okay, thank you for being so candid and also being solution oriented. I want to ask you my two last questions professionally, and I have a third on personal. But my second last question is, if you were to advise the government theoretically, or if the government was going to ask you, what would be your top 3 suggestions to the government to kickstart the economy, to bring back demand, to bring back liquidity?
So the first step that I would say is sectoral reforms. There are,
give us an example, sir.
For example, power sector. There needs to be a lot of reforms in the power sector. It's doing a good job, but power sector reforms needs to be there. For example, BHEL, and we have done the global tenders, for example. Why should a BHEL give tender to an outsider, or why should NTPC give a tender to outside the country when BHEL is available? So can we do something where our sectors sort of improve? That's one classic example. Can we see that a company like BHEL, NTPC, or Engineers India be strengthened, or a Hindustan Aeronautics be strengthened in India? What are the measures? What can we do across? Can we sell their excess land and pump in money? Can we do many such things? So that is the first point. I would say that we need to have sectoral reforms. Even, for example, textile. We should have sectoral reforms. We should see the problems of the textile industry and do a textile reforms. So every sector has its unique problems and has different solutions. So I think we need to have, because the cash flows are also different, and capex is also different. So that is one thing that I would see, that we should have a sectoral reform. That's the first and foremost point that I would like to make. The second point that India needs to do is implementation. And I would like to say very frankly, since I'm passionate about it, that GIFT City, because China is going to lose the trust of people. And Hong Kong, which is the sixth largest financial center. Bombay is the 46th largest. GIFT City is 82nd largest. Has taken steps. We have given tax breaks to them. We have given tax incentives to them. Can we make a Hong Kong in India? Can we make Singapore in India? Can we have somebody like a Dubai center in India? Can we slowly but steadily, can't replace them altogether, but have a 3 to 5 year program to bring in foreign investors, foreign clients, and start other things, including NBFC and financial services there, and slowly make them into a bigger center. So, because financial services is going to play a big role, securities market is going to play a big role in the future of this country. So, I think we need to do that reform very, very clearly and very fast. That is my take on the second reform that I would suggest. And the third reform, which is very generic, is the implementation. We have a lot of announcements, but I think we need to very quickly fix the implementation part of it. And I think...
Dare I interject and say, even within implementation, the policy flip-flops. Inconsistency of policy. Let's say retrospective tax is one example. That confuses investors.
Yes. So we can give a bold statement saying no more retrospective tax. And the third thing, which of course, in one of your other shows, I said, why can't we define a 5-year tax regime for any investor and anybody in India and outside India, so that people are very clear that this is the tax structure in which this country, you're walking into this country with this tax structure. So I think this will bring in a lot of investment. This will also remove all the hurdles that one has and the mindset problems. And it will really put India into a very good territory to really, get into ease of doing business. This is one method, and which the Prime Minister himself is focused on ease of doing business. So I think this reform, the tax reform, should be to the next level. GST was been well implemented, took time. It was a hard boil for all of us, but it's been done and now, it'll have to be streamlined. But similarly, tax regime needs to be very clearly articulated. And that's what I think, that reform is going to be a game changer in my view.
Thank you so much. My last professional question is, what is your advice to entrepreneurs? There is always a silver lining in the cloud. While we know that it is lives and livelihoods both have been impacted, what do you think entrepreneurs can do to make the best of whatever they have?
So, any enterprise, being an entrepreneur myself, any enterprise, and Anurag, you have seen everything, will go through ups and downs. So, I would say you have to deal with the ups and the downs with equanimity and poise, because that is the most important thing. And also, I think every entrepreneur and everybody should have an anchor of 4 to 5, 10 people who can guide them properly. Because you should have very clearly outlined go-to people who can guide you in this situation. Because, we have too many advisors who have no practicality. So I think a practical advice, a very genuine advice, coming at the right stage, I can take a promoter through any difficulty. And for example, I was noticing during this period, a lot of people approached me, what should I do? This SME segment, I have an SME segment, which bank should I go? What should I do? So, and the schemes were, people don't comprehend a scheme. So right people should be there to advise and take an entrepreneur forward. Because the right set of people, go-to people, very important for an entrepreneur. That is what I would say. apart from the capital and the mindset to perform.
Thank you so much. My last question, which is a personal question. Mr. Ravi, in your career and in your life, you achieved name, fame, wealth, you've seen big positions of influence, you have respect, you have children who are wise, you have great health. You achieved everything. What is there for you to achieve? Does Mr. S. Ravi have a bucket list? If yes, what is that bucket list?
So, my bucket list, thank you so much. And I saw bucket list just 2 weeks ago. Thanks to this pandemic, I saw this very good movie. And it was inspiring. The movie itself was inspiring because the spirit in which it was done, very great. But I do have a small little bucket list, not maybe like the one that was shown in the movie, but my first bucket list is to write a good book with all the practical issues of practice, board, and everything. So where it can become easy read and really helps people to solve many issues. The second in my list is to watch in the center court of Wimbledon a final, which I have not done so far. I have watched an EPL, but I have not watched a Wimbledon center court. I would like to see a Lord's Test match, which is being contemplated, the so-called Super Test series, where the first 2 test teams will play. So if it is at Lord's and if India is there, would like to see that match for sure. And if that is my real wish list as far as I'm concerned. The last or 2 more. One that I want to really do is go to the mountains and once in a year for 20 to 30 days, be where serenity is. And that is my very, very, means I have been planning for the last couple of years, but it has never happened. Yet so near and yet so far sort of thing. Then last but not the least, I would like to go to some religious places which I have not been and to some places which I have not been. So I would like to do that for sure because that will be really there. Last but not the least, I would like to engage with all my friends and have some positive energy with all of them. So means keep engaging with them. That's my list. That's my wish. I try to remember everybody's birthdays, everybody's small little things and try to connect with them. So, and I know you are good at that also. So that is one thing that I would like to keep on continuing to do as I move forward. And of course, last but not the least, I would like to be fit as much as I can be.
Absolutely. That's important too. So knowing you for a little while, I can say that is a very authentic list. I believe that, and I'm sure you'll be able to accomplish. I'm tempted to ask you, talk about playing cricket with your sons. What is the advice you give to them? Anyway, children learn from watching you more than what you tell them. They look at what parents do, what the grandparents do, and they learn from that. But still, they also put a lot of value on what is told to them. So what do you tell your children every day as a piece of advice to live their life?
So I am a great believer in loyalty. You should be loyal to the cause for which you are living, loyal to your friends, loyal to people around you, and that's one thing that my children, I feel, have sort of inculcated, because loyalty is the key for everybody to succeed. Because second, I tell them, don't be transactional, go beyond transactions, because there are many qualities. And you know what happens when people live with in the transactional era, they sooner or later they get themselves, people deal with them in the same manner. And that's the third, is to live their life as they want to live, because everybody is special, everybody is different, and everybody has their own sort of capabilities, and I think they should harness their capabilities. And everybody has a phase in life where they do very well. So I think they must utilize this opportunity to move forward and do what they feel like doing. Like my elder son, he was started coaching in England for football. So I would have loved him to be a football coach in England. Of course, they get very well paid, and I would not get paid as much. But the thing is, everybody should pursue what they feel like, and that is my advice. And some sport they should have, where their negative and positive energies are channelized. So that is the 3-4 advices that I would like to give to any youngster apart from my children.
Thank you, Mr. Ravi. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and there is complete harmony between what you preach and what you practice, and that's my takeaway. And when you use the word loyalty, let me also add is commitment. They go hand in hand. So what I see, a commitment to your craft, commitment to your relationships, and a commitment to your family and goals. So I wish you luck. I'm sure we in the Indian business environment can benefit from your advice, from your thoughts, and from the life you've lived. So we wish you luck. For those who have missed this interview, you can watch it on the Business World YouTube channel, and it will also be published in the Business World magazine. So you can read it there. Some people like to consume content in video format, and some people like consuming it in text format. So whatever you're comfortable with. There are questions like this. Mr. Prabhat Kumar is saying, great discussions, very informative. It's only a comment. So thank you, Mr. Prabhat Kumar, for joining. Thank you, Mr. S. Ravi, for being so candid with us. And the beauty about video conversation is that the content lives forever. So
thank you.
I'm sure this content will be watched on the YouTube channel of Business World and on various social media platforms. We wish you luck, and we seek your guidance as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. S. Ravi.
Thank you, Anurag.
Dialogue with Mr. S. Ravi, who is a known expert in the financial services domain, has served on the boards of banks, runs a very successful CA practice, and continues to give back to this country. Thank you, Mr. Ravi.